African and Early Israelite Historiography. The term historiography is ambiguous and has several possible meanings. Karena says, for instance, that when the term medieval historiography is used, some mean the works written by the historians of the Middle Ages, others think of the works that contemporary historians devote to the Middle Ages, others the contemporary works dealing with the study of the medieval historians. For the purposes of this article, the working definition of historiography would have to be close to the third option, something like the study of the historical methods of the mediaeval historians. Of course, this could go on forever, like mirrors reflecting each other. When historiography is mentioned in this study, it may be defined as a culture's way of doing history, of recording it and interpreting it. Working from this basis, then, when a historiographical paradigm is mentioned, what is intended is a paradigm which the people of a particular culture used in order to understand and write history. It can be seen as a sort of conceptual lens for viewing the past. What similarities exist between early Israel's way of doing history and that of pre-colonial Africa? T.J. Mikhael in his 1982 article Jewish Tradition and African Religion speaks of the striking parallels between the cultures of early Israel and traditional Africa. Particularly important for the purposes of this study are his notes on the importance of ancestry in both cultures. To the Hebrews, their common genealogical origin was the source of their unity and even of their faith in God, as seen in phrases such as the God of our fathers and the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. The importance of ancestry is expressed in historiography by genealogies. In African culture, too, ancestry is important, and one's ancestors are also seen as a link to God. Similarly, genealogies are also very important in African historiography. It is very important for scholars to note the degree of similarity that exists between the ancient Near Eastern and the traditional African cultures. They are much closer to each other than either is to modern Western culture. Mikhael notes that the lack of this realization has been a serious shortcoming among Christian missionaries to Africa, and LaRue points out the tremendous possibilities in the field of Old Testament studies that could be opened up by such an approach. 8. The juxtaposition of a few genealogical texts in an attempt to compare historiographic paradigms is a small start to this approach. It is highly likely that this methodology will yield a number of similarities and parallels. The question that we are left with is whether any of these similarities may be attributed to more than the general correspondence between cultures, and that is a much more difficult question, one to which there are no really clear answers. The Lemba. The Lemba people of northern South Africa and southern Zimbabwe have fascinated many scholars due to several unique features. Traditionally, they live in small isolated groups among other tribes, especially the Venda, speaking the languages of the people they live among, but retaining their own identity and traditions, especially regarding food taboos. These include eating no pork and eating only animals that have been killed by having their throats slit. They practice circumcision, although this is far from unusual among African tribes, and also have several customs involving the moon. Van Warmelo also says there is something about their features that appears Semitic rather than African, although statements of this kind need to be viewed with some suspicion as they may be grounded in the prejudices of their time rather than fact. The main economic activities of the Lemba, traditionally, are trading, metallurgy including working with both iron and copper, and pottery. There are several traditions about their origin, but almost all say that their ancestors came from across the sea, or from the other side of the Fusela, on a boat, or from a place called Senna. They also say that the ancestors who came from elsewhere were only men, they brought no women with them, so they intermarried with local women. From their oral traditions and their practices, it seems almost certain that they have some kind of Semitic ancestry at some point in their past. There are three main possibilities as to what form this ancestry or point of contact may have taken: a pre-Islamic Judaic Arabic origin, Yemenite Jews, an Islamic Arabic origin, probably the option preferred by the majority of scholars before genetic evidence was considered, and a Falasha Abyssinia origin. Genetic studies suggest that there may indeed be a Jewish link, and in this case, the first possibility would probably be the most likely. The Lemba themselves also prefer to be considered Jewish, although most of them follow the Christian religion. The pros and cons of each possibility are complicated and quite beyond the scope of this study. Cf. LaRue 1999. What we can say is that it is almost certain that the Limba have some degree of Semitic ancestry of one kind or another. Of course, their ancestry is nevertheless predominantly African. Study of texts. Limba Text 1. The following clan list and the genealogy marked Limba Text 3 come from Manasseh Mphilo's 1936 article The Balimba of the Northern Transvaal. They are transcribed as accurately as possible. All extensive quotes from sources are provided verbatim, including any possible errors. Note, first as we read the clan name then oath. The oath will be for males and females. 1. Mphilo, for males, Bubba, for females, Nyahoda 2. Thobakali, for males, Sabungwain Tho Ba, for females, CV3. Muthavu, for males, Bagali, for females, Bagali 4. Reluzidzo, for males, Manga for females, Kukali 5. Madi, for males, Madi, for females, Nyakavi 6. Malonje, for males, Kunaka, for females, Chasia 7. Hemasi, for males, Hemasi, for females, Hemasi 8. Kavi, for males, Benga, for females, Kavi 9. Mani, for males, Mani, for females, Madi 10. Ravaja, for males, Mani, for females, Madi 11. Munyayi, for males, Haji, for females, Haji 12. Mbilingwa, for males, Haji Wa Sava, for females, Haji Wa Sava 13. Sathaj or Siddiqui, for males, Sathaj, for females, Sathaj. The first thing that needs to be said is that some other sources do not recognize the existence of a Mphilo clan. Von Sickert does not consider Mphilo's information to be fully reliable, and quotes Motinda Mbilingwa as saying that the actual name of this clan is Malanga. Marol, however, does write of an early Limba ancestor named Mphilo, also spelled Mpilo, see Limba Text 4. There is also external corroboration for Mphilo's genealogy, see Limba Text 3. There does not appear to be any parallel in early Israelite culture to this practice of having particular oaths by which the men and women of a certain tribe swear. It is difficult to see a definite pattern in the system. Certainly the names are those of illustrious ancestors, but why some tribes use their own name, while others use the name of a different tribe and yet others use a completely different name, is hard to tell. The practice is not identical to that of their neighbors either. Jacques says that although in other tribes oaths are commonly used, boys and girls sometimes swearing by the name of their older brother or by the name of the chief or of his son, among no other tribe as far as he knows do the clans have oaths exclusive to themselves to the extent that, as here, they may be used to distinguish between groups. Mphilo says elsewhere in the article that these are in fact not all the extant clans. He also refers to clans named Sathaj, Malacca and Salamulela. It is uncertain why he does not include them in his list. One possibility is that he considered these to be offshoots or subgroups of other clans that he did list. Another is that he wanted to make the list of clans closer to 12 to parallel the 12 tribes of Israel. Von Sickert says that his informant, source Solomon Hamandishe said that there were 12 Limba clans, but Von Sickert himself thought that this was simply a result of seeing in the Limba traditions more similarities with Hebrew tradition than actually exist. Limba Text 2. This clan list comes from L.T. Marol's article Lushaka Lwavha Limba. 31. The surnames of the Vhalembao are their different groups. Here are the groups, those of Mbilingwa, those of Hamalindafunga, those of Bikali, those Va Limba of Misi, those Va Limba of Bubba, those Va Limba of Namanga, those Va Limba of Nabi, those Va Limba of Shinwamali, those Va Limba of Mpilo, those Va Limba of Impozi, those Va Limba of Salahu, those Va Limba of Haji, those Va Limba of Siddiqui, those Va Limba of Thavakale, those Va Limba of Nyakabi, those Va Limba of Mani, those Va Limba of Malimashibwe. There are 17 clans in this list, and even allowing for differences in spelling Mphilo, Mpilo, Mani, Mani and so on, the sum of the clans in the two lists is even greater. The tradition of there being only 12 Limba clans appears rather tenuous. An interesting point is that some of the names only known from oaths in Mphilo's list, Haji, Heji, Nyakavi, turn up as clan names in Marol's. Limba Text 3. As has already been mentioned, von Sickert does not accept Mphilo's account. However, there is external corroboration for the earlier part of this genealogy in the form of a 1931 article by A. Jacques. Jacques had as an informant the Moshe mentioned in the above genealogy, and the account he gives of Moshe's ancestry is identical to that part of Mphilo's genealogy. He spells Moshe Moshe and Mphilo Mphelu. It is of course quite possible that Mphilo drew his information from Jacques' article, as much of it is similar. Jacques also includes a very similar version of Limba Text 1 as well as of Mabalanyika's saying discussed below. The differences are for the most part only in the spelling of various names. It seems highly likely that Jacques' article was a major source for Mphilo's. It is interesting to note that this genealogy consists of only 7 generations, 6 if you count up to the author and do not include his daughter. 2 other genealogies in a very similar format, but for different clans, are given in von Sickert's article, and they too consist of only 6 generations. Conaway gives 12 different genealogies of various lines in his article Herkomst, Geschiedenis en genealogie van die Limbasibs in Venda. The longest consists of 10 generations and the shortest of only 4. The average number of generations over all the genealogies provided by Conaway is about 6.2. This is in direct contrast with Abraham Malamat's findings in his article Biblical Genealogies and African Lineages. Malamat finds that the usual genealogical depth number of generations, both in ancient Near Eastern and modern tribal, including African, societies, is 10 to 12. Moreover, he states that in the African lineage models only 4 to 6 generations at the bottom represent real ancestors and relationships, while the 6 at the top are putative. The same held true for Israel, as is evidenced by the initial generations in David's or Saul's ancestor table, which are artificial, reflecting no more than a graduated intra-tribal division, clan, sub-clan and family. Malamat's conclusions on the biblical narratives have been disputed by various scholars, but Johnson, who in the second edition of his book The Purpose of the Biblical Genealogies sets out some of the problems, mentions without disputing it the assertion that the ancient Near Eastern structural pattern for royal genealogies included the use of 10 names. Here is a historiographical point that sets the Limba apart from both the rest of Africa and from early Israel. Their genealogies are much shorter, falling only into the real segment of Malamat's model. Is it possible that this is a result of their relatively recent origins, dating from the arrival of a group of Semites in Africa? The Manasseh on the bottom left is the author of the article in which this genealogy is found. The different spelling of Mphilo at the beginning of the genealogy is probably a typing error rather than a genuine variant spelling. The phrase next to the second name in the genealogy has an interesting explanation, here provided verbatim. My grandfather Maphengwa or Moshe, see genealogy, said that his ancestor Mabalanyika was nicknamed Gomboyi, meaning leg, because he used to travel much on business. When people mocked him because he did not plow, and did not even possess a hoe, he used to say, Gomboyi padza mashengo nda fedza, my leg is my hoe, I walk about to every country buying and selling. Von Sickert's interpretation of this saying, in his 1962 article Limba Clans, is that the Limba, bartering hoes travel throughout the whole country. He cites Mphilo 1936-42, the same source used above, but I disagree with his interpretation of Mphilo's words. It seems much more likely that it is a metaphorical statement saying that Mabalanyika's legs were to him as the hoe was to other people, their means of making a living. He did not farm, instead, he wandered everywhere trading. His legs, not the hoe, were the tools of his trade. This saying has nothing to do with bartering actual hoes. This pattern, where a saying attributed to a certain ancestor is interpolated into a genealogy, occurs in the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis chapter 4 verses 17 to 24. Genesis chapter 4 verses 17 to 24. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and he built a city, and named it Enoch after his son Enoch. To Enoch was born Arad, and Arad was the father of Mehujael, and Mehujael the father of Methushael, and Methushael the father of Lamech. Lamech took 2 wives, the name of the one was Adah, and the name of the other Zillah. Adah bore Jabal, he was the ancestor of those who live in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal, he was the ancestor of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, who made all kinds of bronze and iron tools. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech, listen to what I say, I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain is avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 77-fold. There are many other cases, such as Genesis chapter 4 verse 25 and 5:29, where similar interpolations are made, but these usually have to do with the parents' reasons for giving a child a certain name. This text about Lamech is similar to Emphilo's genealogy in that it interpolates a saying attributed to a certain ancestor. The fragment about Jabez in 1 Chronicles chapter 4 verses 9 to 10 contains both types of interpolation. Limba Text 4. This text, including a genealogical fragment, comes from L.T. Morol's article Lushaka Lwavha Limba. The death of Kalahonye. Kalahonye lived for a long time till he was very old. When he died he left many children and grandchildren. Those we know are as follows: 1. Belengwa, 2. Tanganalo, 3. Siddiqui, 4. Bikali, 5. Impozi, 6. Impilo. Tradition says that Kalahonye Malemba's death caused his children to remain quarreling, sick amongst themselves. Those who were fighting were Belengwa and Tanganalo. Tanganalo was the elder one who was born from the younger woman, and Mbilingwa was the younger one who was born from sick the elder woman. Tradition says they fought and Tanganalo was defeated. Then Tanganalo ran away to the Va Lozwi of Vele Lambeyu. That came because Mbilingwa was being supported by all the younger brothers. Tanganalo was alone, that is why he was defeated, because Bikali, Siddiqui, Impilo and Empozi stood with Mbilingwa. Then, tradition says, Mbilingwa went to a place called Dumwi and he gave his brothers pieces of land. In that land of Dumwi there was a high mountain in the plains. The names of the brothers correspond in some cases with names of known Limba clans. Impilo is elsewhere in the text spelled Imphalo, giving credence to Emphilo's claim despite Von Sicard's doubts. Of course, Morol's article is later than Emphilo's, so it is a possibility that Morol was influenced by Imphalo. Did the clans descend from the brothers, or was the genealogy invented later to explain the clans? Henage says, in the records of early Mesopotamia there are several instances of lists of rulers which, on closer inspection and comparison, have turned out to be lists of tribal groupings and place names. The same is true of several biblical genealogies, the pedigrees of pre-Islamic Arabia, early Ireland, and others. The question is which came first. This text corresponds closely with several texts from the Hebrew Bible. It is much shorter than its equivalents, being a very recent summary of various traditions. But there are a number of salient points that are very interesting, particularly the following: the patriarch of the tribe has various sons who are the ancestors of the various clans. The brothers have a conflict. The victor in this conflict is not the elder brother but the younger. This younger brother is the son of the preeminent elder wife. This pattern corresponds in some telling ways with the genealogical narrative pattern found in the stories of the Israelite patriarchs. I will set out the similarities in the stories of the patriarchs. Abraham, Gen 16:21. He has two sons, Ishmael, the elder, and Isaac, the younger. Their conflict is not direct, but occurs through the two mothers. The younger son, Isaac, is considered the chosen heir. He is the son of Sarah, Abraham's wife, while Ishmael is the son of Hagar, his concubine. Isaac, Gen 25-27. He has two sons, Esau, the elder, and Jacob, the younger. They have a direct conflict over two things, the birthright and the blessing, both of which ought by rights to belong to Esau as the older son. The younger son, Jacob, a trickster figure, acquires both. Both sons have the same mother, but tellingly, Jacob is their mother's favorite. Jacob, Gen 29-50, he has 12 sons by two different wives. One of them, Joseph, is in conflict with the rest over his dreams, which seem to say that he will be the leader. After many trials he prevails and becomes the father of two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, reckoned separately in dividing the land because Levi did not receive a portion of land. Thus he receives a double portion of the inheritance, traditionally the prerogative of the firstborn. Gen 48-22, Joseph is his father's favorite because he is the son of the wife whom he loves more. Joseph, Gen 48. He has two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Their grandfather Jacob crosses his hands when blessing them so as to make the younger, Ephraim, more important than the elder. He also names them in this order when blessing them. In this narrative, unlike the others, the mother does not play an important part. Perhaps she is left out of the story to some extent because she is a foreigner. All the texts given here as parallels are narratives rather than genealogies, and the similarity in historiography is found in a narrative paradigm rather than an aspect of genealogical writing. Do the similarities between these texts mean anything at all? It is quite possible that these similarities are due to the well-known phenomenon of feedback, where information brought into a society by outsiders, missionaries are an excellent example, is absorbed into the traditions of that society and is later repeated to historians as indigenous oral tradition. Henage states that the two most common and influential sources of feedback are the Bible and the Quran. 48 Biblical and other scriptural themes, as he says, appear and reappear in oral traditions throughout Africa. 49 The Lemba have been exposed to both Christian and Muslim missionary activity, and so there is a high likelihood of such feedback in their traditions. However, there are many factors, such as archaeological evidence of early trade in southern Africa, and never forgetting the genetic study, that argue for a genuine Near Eastern origin for the Lemba. Henage is scathing about such theories. Until recently many Africanists argued that the more advanced African states were somehow related, perhaps genetically, to ancient Near Eastern states. If the more extravagant schemes sometimes cited are now largely disowned, pale imitations survive and sometimes flourish. 50. There is one thing in favor of a genuine connection, though. Is it likely that such an obscure thing as a certain method of historiography, a way of looking at history in terms of a paradigm of a conflict between brothers where the younger brother, who is the son of the preeminent wife, or who is preferred by the mother, prevails, something that is likely to filter through and become feedback? And if this does happen, might it not mean that it struck a chord with the culture that adopted it so enthusiastically because it related to ideas that they already had? This seems to be the case with many of the ideas expressed by the Lemba about their origin. An important clue may be found in Mphilo's article. He says that the head of each Lemba clan is generally the eldest son of the chief wife of the head family. On the one hand, this fact argues that the son of preeminent wife prevails paradigm is an intrinsic part of Lemba culture and not attributable to feedback. However, on the other hand, it could be argued that this means that the narrative assumes a completely different system of inheritance from that found in the Hebrew Bible, that the leadership of the chief wife's son is expected in Lemba culture and unexpected in Hebrew culture, and that any similarities are the result of sheer coincidence. One could, however, argue that where this pattern occurs in the stories of 4 successive generations of patriarchs, it is not really unexpected anymore. Conclusion. There are certainly noteworthy and interesting correspondences between the historiography of the Lemba and that of the early Israelites. However, this was considered likely at the beginning of the study. The parallels between early Israelite and traditional African culture, as noted by Mikhael, made that a highly probable outcome. Noteworthy findings are the relative shortness of Lemba genealogies in comparison with those both of the ancient Near East and of most modern tribal cultures, which may argue for a relatively recent founding event for the Lemba compared with their neighbors, as well as the narrative paradigm of the struggle between brothers which is won by the younger brother, born to the preeminent wife. This is the dominant paradigm in the patriarchal narratives of the Hebrew Bible, and corresponds with the accepted inheritance custom among the Lemba. The case of a saying attributed to an ancestor being interpolated into a genealogy is perhaps less noteworthy. It is a stylistic feature that seems to lend itself to the genre of genealogy, and could quite possibly occur in the genealogies of very different cultures. Is there a marked correspondence between Limba and Hebrew Bible texts, more than the general similarities that were expected? It cannot be determined for certain whether any of the correspondences that do occur are closer than may be explained by the already noted parallels between African and early Israelite culture. However, the paradigm of the brothers, in particular, is provocative, and it might be very interesting to do a detailed narratological analysis of the texts in which this historiographical paradigm occurs.